Sorry. Meeting today. Welcome you all here, and we get on with it. So, thank you, Patrick. You can do the.
Kia ora, thank you. Whakatakata hau ki te uru. Whakatakata hau ki te tonga. Kia makinikina ki uta, kia taratara ki tai. He aki ana ki atakura. He tio, he hoka, he hauhu, tiho mauru ora.
We haven't got to that yet. Sorry. We're expecting to be finished by 1:30. Seconder. All in favour? Against? Carried. Agenda? No. All in favour? Against? Carried. Any disclosures of interest?
Yep. So I'm patron of the Pirongia Restoration Trust. That role is essentially a ceremonial, like I had to give a speech at the big Jubilee event. I had no knowledge at all of even a submission of a project, but I thought it was important to disclose that position. Yep.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Yeah. I move it to receive the minutes. Emma. Bruce. Sorry, no. All in favour? Against? Carried. All right, into the agenda. You want to?
Yeah. Look, thanks very much, councillors. Look, just a quick few introductions. So we've got Nikki Ismay and Andrew Thomas. They'll be answering any questions and presenting a brief presentation to you. In support, we've got Kate Pepper and Jacob Dexter. Brett Bailey's acting me over there, and Therese Belver. And the purpose for today is for the committee to consider recommendations for the 2024-25 Natural Heritage Fund funding round. And with that, I think hand over to staff.
Thank you, Nikki and Andrew.
Afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to run through the main points of the report, but broadly will be taken as read. So just a bit of an overview of the applications received and the budgets, a geographical demonstration of the current groups that we have funded along with applications to this round, a summary of the projects that we're recommending for funding, and an outline of those that are recommended not to be funded in this round, and then just a little bit of context around the next NHF funding round for 2025-26 financial year. And then once I've run through it, if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to take them. So the 2024-25 NHF funding round opened on the 7th of October and it closed on the 1st of November 2024. We received 10 applications that were requesting $3.376 million in funding. Our total budget for this year is $2,077,932, and we had prior commitments from previously approved grants for $624,251, and then also through the LTP process, $50,000 of this funding was allocated to the Collective Impact Initiative. So that leaves $1,403,681 available for distribution. We just thought for a bit of context, it would be interesting for you to see a geographical distribution of currently funded projects. So this is the projects that are currently being funded through the Natural Heritage Partnership Program made up of the Natural Heritage Fund. So there are 5 of those pink dots. The Environmental Initiatives Fund, which there are currently 20 projects being supported, and they are the blue dots. And then 36 small-scale community initiative fund projects, which are the pink dots. Oh, yellow, are they? Yes, sorry, yellow. So for this year's applications, you'll find this table on page 23 of the report, and it just summarises the applicants, the amounts that they've requested, the funding period, and the recommendations that we've outlined. And we'll go through these in a little bit more detail, and there will be plenty of time for questions if needed. Next slide. And those same 10 applications are shown on the map here. So again, you can see the geographical distribution. So it's a little bit hard to see up there, but it is, of course, in the report. The green dots are those recommended to be funded. The red dots are recommended to be declined, and there is one orange dot which is deemed ineligible. So staff are recommending that 4 of the 10 applications are funded for a total of $1,341,616, and that consists of 3 applications fully funded as requested and 1 application partially funded. We try and recommend that applications are fully funded to enable the recipients to carry out their projects to the full extent and mitigate against the risk of reduced outcomes. That doesn't mean that council is fully funding the project. That just means that the amount that has been requested by council is being recommended for full funding. 1 application we're recommending partial funding, but to be distributed over 3 years rather than the requested 4 years. And that was because the amount that they requested was more than double the recommended $300,000, which we outlined in guidance provided to the applicants and up on our website ahead of it opening. Now, you may notice that there's a discrepancy between the amount available for distribution, which was 1,403,681, and the amount we're recommending for funding, which is 1,341,616. And that is because of a discrepancy which was discovered during a Q1 forecasting. So there's $62,065, which we're recommending goes into the reserve to be applied in the next round in 2025. We'd already met, the moderation panel had already met and developed the recommendations prior to that discrepancy being discovered. Next. So the first project that we are recommending for funding is Arosa Aotearoa New Zealand for their Karioi project, and that is broadly for pest animal control, a seabird coastal ranger and volunteer coordinator, Mātauranga Māori cultural health monitoring, and health and safety materials and expert guidance. They've requested $393,000 over 4 years, and we're recommending that that be fully funded. Their combined assessment score was 95.7%. Moiho Environment Group, we're recommending that they are partially funded. So they have requested funding for pest animal, pest plant control and community and school engagement programs and materials, traps and consumables. They requested $689,524 over 4 years, and we're recommending funding of $445,593 over 3 years. And they received a combined assessment score of 93.3%. The third project is with Karakia Timatanga Okahu Restoration Society. They're requesting for pest animal control and administration support, traps and bait, track maintenance and biodiversity outcome monitoring. and they have requested 303,000 and over a 3-year term. We're recommending that they're fully funded, and they received a combined assessment score of 89.7%. And the final project that we're recommending for funding is the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust. They're requesting sub-regional hub labour to support capacity and capability of the iwi and hapu-led sub-projects, health and safety support, and support for their data and monitoring platform. They've requested $200,000 over 2 years, and we're recommending fully funding. They received a combined assessment score of 84.7%.
Sorry, is it at the end? Do you want us to ask questions at the end?
If that's okay.
Yep, that's okay.
We're just about through.
Yep.
So there are 6 projects that we're recommending to be declined. They are the Piako Waihau Catchment Trust, who requested 399,920. Piakina Limited, that requested 338,958,000. Te Paiaka Lands Trust, 297,000. Kapinga M Trust, 458,640. West Waikato Coastal Community Catchment Group, 41,500. And those 5 are recommended to be declined for a combination of oversubscription and also lower assessor scores. And the final one, the New Zealand Coastal Trust, for 254,536, was deemed ineligible due to the project not meeting the scale needed for this fund under landscape scale. And then just for a little bit of context, just around the next round, because we received this money through the LTP and we wanted to get it out the door, we ran this round late in the year. And so there will be another NHF round opening in April 2025 with decisions in August 2025. So we need to do that in order to meet the buffer for election period, and there'll be approximately 1.4 million available to distribute.
Yep. So,
Questions?
yeah, great report. Well, first time for me to see something like this, but I wouldn't have minded kind of like knowing, has any of the entities that did, got the high assessment and the 4, had they had funding in the past, and kind of could we have information on that in there for me? And then also for the ones that did miss out, like I know there's one from my region, it only missed out by, 2% in the ratings. Do you go back to them and say, look, you were close, but this is why you didn't meet, because I think that's the 2 next ones, I think 84 or 86, and I think the bottom one was 87 that passed. And do you go back to them because the next funding round of 1.4 and so they know they might be able to meet that?
Yep, I can answer both of those. So thanks for the feedback, and we can definitely include in future reports whether or not they've received funding from us previously. In the case of this particular round, 3 out of the 4 that we're recommending for funding have received funding from us in the past. So the Karioi project, Moiho and Pirongia, those 3 have received funding support from Regional Council in the past. And the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust, we have had a lot of engagement with them, and we've been supporting them in other ways. Some of their sub-projects are being supported, but we have not previously supported them as a hub.
What about the other 6 that missed out?
The other 6 that missed out, I can tell you. Just while I'm collecting that information, to your second point, absolutely we go back to those that, particularly those that were close. We have working relationships with many of these groups, and I think the report outlines that there are some instances with those where we're already providing support through other parts of council. But we definitely identify those higher scoring ones that we would work with them to help them to develop those slightly weaker parts of their application, so that if they choose to apply in future rounds, that they would be better positioned to have a higher score.
And thirdly, sorry, is there a possibility without having any involvement to sit into one of those groups, just to, you know, for a first-time councillor, just to observe how they work through, you know, with the staff, how they work through to get the percentage, you know, whether it's the first group or the second group?
You mean through the assessment
Yeah.
process? So the assessment process is very lengthy. We have 3 assessors, so 2 internal and 1 independent external assessor, and it takes them a number of weeks to go through the application process and score against each of the criteria. So there's 6 criteria and a number of questions, sub-questions. And then we have a moderation meeting where the combined assessor scores are discussed to make sure that we have covered everything off. I'm not sure what the implications are for councillors to be part of those meetings.
I mean, it's a very operational bit of work. I mean, we're happy to help with better understanding of the process, but I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate to involve councillors through the assessment side of it.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, it's just that, you know, like, we've received this report, it comes in, I'm sure it's going through governments, but I don't really know kind of the process beforehand to come to this. I've had the workshop and I did enjoy the workshop, and it was quite, you know, revealing on the whole of the Natural Heritage Fund. And going from the $5 to the $15.80, and I voted against it just because it put up the rates by that 1%. For me, I just wanted more insight, because I am passionate about, you know, I'm still passionate about the Heritage Fund, because I think it's one of our core responsibilities as a council. But yeah, it was just more insight to see how that first 2 processes went along.
Just
Can I?
in relation to that, can I, sorry?
Yeah, you go first then.
Oh, I just, so council is who approves the policy that that sets the criteria. And so that's from my point of view, that is where governors set the direction. We set the things that applicants are assessed against, and then it is, in my view, it is for the staff assessors to abide by that policy. If we don't agree with the policy settings, then that's the conversation that we need to have as governors. I'm trying to think when we last reviewed those policies.
Yeah, so we reviewed the policy in 2024, and I think when we did that, we did say that it should be almost a live policy, so that you can continually work on improvements every round. So happy to, you know, bring the policy back and explain how it worked, because I'm sure the team have got some ideas about whether there's some improvements that could make. I mean, that might be helpful as well. And then again, reinforce the process that the team go through to implement the policy.
Yeah, I've got no problem with the policy. We've evolved with it, but it's just the process that it's gone from this to come to me. Yeah, I don't feel as though I'm fully understand why it's come to those 4 and not the other 6 or any others, you know, and why some were accountable. Noel, you were.
Can I just add in there? I understand where you're coming from, Mike, but we've given the direction for the staff to make recommendations. I would have been sitting asking the same question as you were 4 months ago, but luckily myself and Warren, and I'm luckily with Warren, I suppose, we've been able to go and visit these organisations, and they bring their concerns to us as councillors, going, oh, we see these as becoming an issue. And then I've talked about it with Nikki and Patrick, who these are what our groups and our community are saying. So I think that's where you have to leave it at the moment, Mike. You need to involve yourself in the that organisation in Taupo that didn't get funding and just go, hey, I'm here, I'm willing to listen to what your concerns are.
I am involved with them and I know what their concerns are.
Well, then you bring them to Nikki.
Should have been.
Yeah. I think that's the easier, you don't want to get involved in that, you're giving it direction. I think you just got to keep safe.
I'm not asking for getting involved with redirection. It's just for me, it's being transparent and just understanding, how the process is and how they get to that rating, through there. And I understand that the policy sets their work program and how they do it. But I just, you've got two external people that come in? Well,
Just one external, two internal staff members that assess. Yeah. And then there's 6, which is apart from the one external, it's all internal people that make up the moderation panel.
I'm sure you can take this offline and have a discussion with Nikki and go through it, that you feel comfortable with it. So, thank you. Noel.
Firstly, can I say thank you for the report. To me, this is the true governor's report. Insofar as we had a policy that we adopted last year, it's attached at the back here for our understanding. The staff, as was explained at the workshop briefing, went through a 2-stage process. None of that material is here as to how they got the percentage allocation and whatever, but that's part of the process. So if we accept that the process is right, and we've got no reason to not believe, then the recommendations before us are valid. I've spoken with the acting director, Patrick, prior to the meeting, and was assured there was internal auditing and the likes that validates these checks, etc. So there is no reason why, as governors, we need to know more than what's here, because that's what governors are supposed to do. They're not supposed to do the work. So on that basis, I am satisfied that the panel have put together a good high-level report. It meets the needs, certainly meets my needs. And Mr. Chair, I am happy to move the recommendations as set out on page 18 and 19. And thank the staff for the work. And let's get out and get that money spent on these wonderful projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Clyde, you got a question?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the distribution of the funding, how is that provided? Is it drip fed or a lump sum payment, or does it vary?
So the payments vary depending on how many years the applicants have applied for. So for Arosha, they have requested over 4 years, so that would be distributed over a 4-year period. The same for Moiho. Pirongia was requested over 3 years, so that would be distributed over a 3-year period. And Manaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust would be distributed over 2 years. It's not always evenly distributed. We ask for a budget, and so it would be given out based on the budget items that they have requested.
So if it was a 4-year term, it'd be four payments.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and with all of these projects, there's a lot of money going out, and there has been for many years. Is there any requirement in the process for these organisations to provide outcomes, monitoring outcomes, species that are to benefit, not how many rats you kill or how many possums you kill, but actual tangible results in regard to, is it benefiting the species they're trying to protect? Is there any of that monitoring requirement within these presentations?
Yes, we do have monitoring requirements, and you're quite right that we need to be focusing on outcomes rather than outputs. So an output would be how many rats have been killed, and an outcome would be how many of a particular bird or plant species are in the bush or the area. And you're also quite right that these projects are very, very long term. So depending on the maturity of the project as to what kind of outcome monitoring they are undertaking, and it would be fair to say that as projects mature, they tend to focus less on outputs and more on outcomes, but we have a mixture of both. And we are actually undertaking a project now whereby we will have more standardized outcome monitoring, and we will make that a requirement moving forward.
Okay, thanks. Just one more thing. Of the 4 recommendations here, do any of them involve funding of aerial poisoning operations?
No, they don't.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Clyde. Most of those questions were you at the workshop 2 weeks ago or not?
I don't know now.
No, because most of the questions you asked were actually in the workshop questions that we did last then. So anyway, if you weren't there, you were welcome to ask them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce.
Yeah, so to some extent, you guys have foreshadowed the points I wanted to make because they're actually more about the next iteration of policy development. You know, what are our policies? So I'm unclear still, and we may have been told in the past about this, but about the statutory protection legal status of land where this work is being undertaken, because to ensure that results are permanent and legacy results, there are some thresholds that need to be, and I looked through the policy document and I couldn't see any specific mention of that issue. And then and these are also the complexities of the decision making that lies behind the process. I'm assuming that there is some sort of balancing going on in relation to co-funding and some critical examination of the extent to which, for example, if a project were to be on Department of Conservation administered land, that they are also fronting up with some cash before we put cash in. So that's 2 things I'd be interested in terms of policy development. The third one relates to matters relating to fencing of lands. I know, for example, that the QE2 Trust has a requirement. There's normally a 50% sharing process that occurs, and I'm interested where these proposals come in which have fencing in them, whether or not we are in the same sort of space, and whether we also consider our policy in relation to other land management in our region, because we're involved in fencing for land retirement, we're involved for fencing in a multiple range of ways, and I'm interested in the sweet spot of making sure that we get the most out of fencing whenever we're involved in fencing, and that includes in relation to co-funding. Yeah, and then the question of what is the regional council's focus, which in the RMA is really about what's going on private land. I know that at least one of the proposals that came in, because they phoned me and asked me a series of questions in advance of this round, were clearly focusing on ensuring they were doing the bit on private land and letting the other stuff on the Department of Conservation administered land be done another way. Just you know, what are the checks, I guess, in relation to our policy that we're ticking some of these things off. I think that's all. So, and they don't need to be answered today. I don't expect anybody to give us an answer today. These are just foreshadowing some things that we might want to consider in a review and update of our policy. Thank you.
Yeah, especially when it comes to fencing, we can't protect anything if it's not boundaried. Ben actually brought up a good question this morning when I was driving over. He said QE2's been given a $4 million. Do you know anything about that, Bruce? Could you talk to that?
Yeah, no, they've been given a bit of a top up by central government, but that top up is still somewhat short of their target for 150 new covenants in the calendar year. So they had a shortfall of funding because the nature of the the nature program that the previous government put in fell away, and that meant that they were having to go back to an earlier level of service. And this money helps maintain to some extent the Jobs for Nature level of service, but it still is inadequate. They were aiming for this year to go for, I think, 150 new covenants. So yeah, there was a range of new initiatives funded by central government. The other one, of course, was Wilding Pines and Central Otago. So it's all extremely valuable funding.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Nikki, do you want to answer any of those questions of Bruce's or you want to?
I think somebody's captured them, and I think in terms of our policy review, they're things that we need to consider a bit more broadly.
Thank you.
Sorry, I might have missed it. The timing for that next policy review?
In the policy, it says that it needs to be reviewed at least 3 yearly, but we're very comfortable with doing it more frequently if that's something that council would like.
Just one last comment.
Yeah, where you go, Noel?
In the policy review, I would ask that we question whether councillors need to be involved in this. I know we had some discussion before the meeting and there was a sense, and I'm not sure either way at the moment, but the process is such, it's well defined, it's great high level report. There is no ability on the information that we receive here for councillors to really check it, and we've either got to say yes or no. Essentially, once it comes to this stage, do councillors need to be involved? And the only reason I can suspect is the volume of money involved. If that's it, well, that's fine. But there does not appear to be any other reason for councillors to be involved in this process. So if we could just look at that, and I think it'll be dealt with in a few moments, but the reality is process, report, how much involvement do we need to be here? So, and on that basis, Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we finish the discussion and put the motion.
Yeah. No, I understand where you come from there, Noel, and I'm going through a governance program at the moment, and the biggest thing about governance is actually good information, and it's clear and decisive of what you're receiving and you're reading. This was a good paper to read. And I know it had those little bits that Mike saying that he'd like a little bit more information, but that's most probably.
And I disagree with Noel. I would like it to come to governance, even though, you know, it's.
We're not,
you
we're
know,
not making
good
a decision though,
reports,
Mike.
stuff like that. I'm not,
It's a
no,
discussion.
I'm just saying, I'm
Yeah.
just saying that I do believe it's part, and I would want to,
Yeah.
you know, because it's great to read and see what's happening in the catchment.
Well, it's good to read a good paper that's precise and ask the workshop that we did 2 weeks ago, you delivered on what we asked you to do. And yeah, so I take it off. It was easy to read. It's not like some of our things and we got to sit there and really study it and understand every question we want to ask. It's a good paper. So thank you, Nikki and Andrew, for your hard work, and the other staff in the room. Thanks very much for everything. So I would like to put that to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks very much for all your hard work. Awesome.
Thank you.
We went 4 minutes over. Oh, sorry.
All right. Thanks,
Patrick.
mate. Thanks. Unuhia, mai te uru tapanui. Kia wātea, kia māma. Ngākau, te tina, te hinga ngarau. E te ara takatu. Hoia rā e rongo, whakaraia. Aki ki rongo. Kia tina, tina. Hauea, huie, tākia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Meeting closed.